With April's official unveiling of the Switch 2 right around the corner, speculation season over Nintendo's next console is out in full force. Whether it be pondering the console's specs or theorizing what games we might see in its launch lineup, there are plenty of questions to ask. In this video though, I want to take some time to speculate on something a little bit less flashy: Nintendo Switch Online. Because while it might not be as exciting as talking about the next 3D Mario game, I think that one of the most substantial upgrades we see going from Switch 1 to Switch 2 might be the console's Nintendo Switch Online features, particularly regarding its classic games offerings. And in this video, I want to explain why. Before I get into it though, as usual, if you like this content, please be sure to like the video and subscribe to my channel. 500 subs is right around the corner, and I couldn't be more appreciative for each and every one of you guys who watch. Every subscription makes a big difference, so please consider hitting that subscribe button and sticking around if you enjoy what you see today. Now with that out of the way, let's get into today's video. First, let's talk a little bit about the current iteration of Nintendo Switch Online, or NSO for short. Nintendo Switch Online is the subscription you need to play your Switch games online, hence the name. As an added bonus, it also allows you to play some classic NES and Super NES games on your Switch as well. A nice touch, but pretty bare bones for a subscription service, especially when compared to Microsoft or Sony's more premium offerings. However, the service became much more interesting in October of 2021 when Nintendo released its NSO expansion pack. In addition to including access to certain games' DLC offerings, a feature that Nintendo seems to have forgotten about in the last couple of years, the expansion pack also introduced N64 and Game Boy Advance titles into the fold. This was huge news when Nintendo announced it, and many of us, myself included, rushed to our Switches to upgrade our subscriptions to the next tier. I always thought it was cool to have access to classic NES and SNES games on my Switch, but outside of playing some of the all-time great SNES titles like A Link to the Past, it wasn't a feature I used too often. I would say the vast majority of those libraries have remained largely untouched on my Switch. But N64 and GBA games? Now that was a game changer for me. Like many others, I grew up on those libraries, and I could not wait to re-experience them when they dropped. I had a blast rediscovering childhood favorites like Paper Mario, The Legend of Zelda: The Minish Cap, and Mario & Luigi Superstar Saga. And I got just as much enjoyment from diving into classics that I missed as a kid, like Golden Sun. As cool as it is to have classic NES and SNES games on the service, the fact is a lot of those games haven't aged quite as well as the more modern, basically timeless GBA library, so adding those games to the service was a massive addition. Notice I didn't include the N64 in that statement because some of those games have not aged very gracefully either, but it's still cool to have them. So that brings us to today and the impending Switch 2 unveiling next month. While the April Direct is sure to focus heavily on the new Mario Kart game, a couple of other Nintendo heavy hitters, and plentiful third-party support, I might be most interested in if we get any NSO updates at the presentation. As I said earlier, it's a well-known and basically accepted fact at this point that Nintendo's online offerings pale in comparison to what Sony and Microsoft offer on their platforms. Nintendo adding features like trophies and parties and dedicated voice chat to NSO on the Switch 2 would be amazing, but to be honest, it would also be pretty shocking to me at this point. As baffling as it might seem, I'm just not sure Nintendo is ever going to add those features. However, Nintendo still has a huge chance to massively upgrade its online offerings by simply building on the foundation that it has already laid with the Switch 1. In other words, it's time to bring GameCube games to Nintendo Switch Online. I think that one of the biggest issues the Switch 2 might face is how it's going to differentiate itself from its predecessor. For all intents and purposes, it seems like the Switch 2 really is, for the most part, just a more powerful Switch. And don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining about that. That's what I personally wanted, and I know many other gamers feel the same way. But if the Switch 2 isn't going to differentiate itself from the Switch 1 with a vastly different form or revolutionary new Nintendo gimmick, then it becomes even more important for it to differentiate itself by excelling in the less flashy areas. Of course, the Switch 2 being vastly more powerful is the primary and most important example of this, but providing substantial upgrades to the Switch 2's NSO offerings is another way that the console can make itself seem like a massive step up from its little brother. Or I guess the Switch 1 would technically be the big brother since it's older, but you know what I mean. And like I said, Nintendo adding voice chat and abolishing the god-awful friend code system, are upgrades that we simply cannot count on, so we should be focusing our hopes and dreams on Nintendo significantly beefing up its classic games library. Will it happen though? Or am I just dreaming? At the very least, it seems like a strong possibility. Rumors of GameCube titles being added to NSO have been making their rounds on the internet for what seems like ages now. And while oftentimes rumors like these never materialize, it's also true that a lot of the time where there's smoke, there's fire. I think a better reason to believe though, is to just look at things practically. Nintendo clearly wants NSO to be a pillar of the Switch 2 for the duration of its lifespan, and if that's going to be the case, then they're going to eventually need to find a new source to pull classic games from. Not to take another shot at the N64, but it's pretty obvious that that console isn't exactly known for having a huge library of great games. While there are still some beloved titles like Diddy Kong Racing and Donkey Kong 64 that Nintendo could add to the service, Nintendo has already exhausted most of the N64's best games. The OG Switch has now been in our lives for more than 8 years, and if the Switch 2 is going to have a similarly lengthy lifespan, then Nintendo is going to need some more games for NSO. They might be pretty good at this whole drip feeding us classic game strategy, but I think even Nintendo would struggle to make Donkey Kong 64 and Diddy Kong Racing releases last for the next 8 years. And thus, adding GameCube titles to the service is the most obvious solution here. While it also might not be home to the biggest library out there, the GameCube still has a much deeper library than the N64, and will give Nintendo plenty more titles to pull from over the course of the Switch 2's lifespan to satiate gamers wanting more out of their NSO subscriptions. The big hang up here is what it always tends to be with this sort of thing: money. Nintendo has shown over the last couple of years that it can and will release its GameCube titles as standalone full-price $60 remakes. Hell, Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door, as much as I love it, released as a full $60 remake running at half the frames per second of the GameCube original. It's clear that Nintendo values its GameCube library at a more premium price than its N64 or GBA titles, and thus adding those games to the NSO subscription service alongside games the company views as lesser might be a tough sell. But I don't think that hurdle necessarily kills the dream. I think the most likely scenario is Nintendo just releases another third tier of the service, this one being more expensive and including access to titles from the GameCube library. It's not a perfect solution. Sony's 3-tiered PS Plus service is convoluted and underwhelming for many, but I think that most people would be happy to pay a little bit more for GameCube titles. I know that I would. And while I'm talking about my hopes and dreams, why stop there? Nintendo could get really crazy with it and eventually add Wii and DS titles to the service as well. I still haven't worked out in my fantasy if this would be an additional, even more expensive 4th tier, or if they would just really hit our wallets with that 3rd tier, but man would this be cool. And while I do think that it's less likely than us getting GameCube games, and probably much further away, I actually don't think it's impossible. While the GameCube library on its own is substantially larger than what Nintendo currently has to work with, adding the Wii and DS libraries to NSO would give Nintendo a wealth of games that could easily sustain its classic games catalog for the duration of the Switch 2's life, no matter how long that might be. A hurdle here has always been the unique features of the Wii and DS platforms, with the Wii being heavily centered around its motion controls and the DS its dual screens. This seems like less of an issue than ever before though, with the versatility of the Switch 2. The Switch's Joy-Cons have always had motion control functionality, but combine that now with what looks to be the capability for them to act as mouse-like pointers, and you have all the tools needed to replicate the Wii's motion controls or the DS's reliance on its touchscreens and stylus. The second screen of the DS makes things a little bit more complicated, but not impossible. I'm sure if Nintendo really wanted to, they could find a solution to that problem as well. It's just a matter if they want to make that investment a priority. Like I said, I think Wii and DS games would be further down the road, but it's essential that Nintendo comes out of the gates with the Switch 2 with a vastly improved and revamped NSO, and I believe adding GameCube games to the service is the easiest and most logical way to do just that. And I think there's a good chance it happens. Let me know what you think in the comments below though. Do you think we have a shot at getting GameCube games on the Switch 2? Are my hopes of getting Wii and DS games nothing but a crazy fantasy? Let me know your thoughts, and as always, thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next video.